The sound of laughter and murmurs filled the hall as guests mingled around the charity event. Olivia moved swiftly through the crowd, her eyes bright as she greeted each person. She paused, glancing toward the far end of the room, where a man sat in a wheelchair. He seemed lost in his thoughts, observing everyone with a quiet presence that drew her in. She noticed his gentle smile, the way his eyes crinkled slightly at the corners. There was something about him that felt calming. He wasn't trying to be noticed, yet somehow he stood out. She glanced away, but her gaze kept drifting back. The evening stretched on. Music played softly in the background, and people shuffled between the tables. Olivia felt a tap on her shoulder, and there he was, his wheelchair rolling smoothly over the polished floor. "Hi," he said, voice carrying a warmth that seemed to blend with the gentle hum of the room. "You're the one keeping everything running, aren't you?" Caught off guard, Olivia blinked and then laughed softly, feeling her cheeks warm. "I just like helping out," she murmured, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Seems like it's more than that," he replied with a knowing look. "People like you. You make places like this come alive." They exchanged smiles, and before she knew it, the conversation took off. It wasn't forced or awkward, just easy. They spoke about everything, from the event to life's little quirks. He had a way of looking at things differently, and Olivia found herself captivated. When the night came to an end, he handed her his number. She stared at it for a moment, fingers tracing the digits as if they held a promise. But as she walked away, doubts crept in. It wasn't about the conversation or the laughter they'd shared. It was about something she'd never faced before. What would it be like to date someone in a wheelchair? The next few days passed in a haze of thoughts. The numbers stayed in her bag, untouched but never forgotten. Each time she reached for her phone, her heart beat a little faster. Could she do this? What if it was too complicated? But something pushed her to take that leap. One evening, sitting on her bed, she typed out a simple message and hit send. His reply was immediate, filled with warmth and a hint of excitement. And that was it. Just like that, they were making plans for a date. The day of their first date arrived. Olivia stepped into the cafe, scanning the room nervously. Then she saw him, his smile lighting up as he spotted her. The nerves melted away as they sat down and began to talk. Time seemed to blur, and they stayed until the cafe dimmed its lights, signaling closing time. There was no hesitation, no awkward glances or uncomfortable silences. He didn't make her feel like she was with someone different. He made her feel like she was with someone she could love. Weeks turned into months. The more they spent time together, the more Olivia realized that Ethan's disability was just a small part of who he was. It wasn't what defined him. She loved his patience, his humor, the way he listened to her like no one else had. They would sit in the park for hours, talking until the stars blinked to life above them. And each time she looked at him, her heart would swell a little more. Yet, there was still a shadow of doubt that lingered. As their relationship deepened, Olivia couldn't ignore the questions swirling in her mind. What would people think? What if things got hard in the future? She wanted to be strong, to be certain, but sometimes the uncertainty felt too heavy. One evening, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a soft golden glow over the park, Olivia turned to him. He was gazing at the sky, his face peaceful. "Ethan," she whispered, breaking the silence. He looked at her, his eyes gentle. "Yes? I've been thinking," she hesitated, searching for the right words. "I love being with you, but sometimes I worry about the future. I've never been in a relationship like this before." A silence settled between them, and she braced herself for disappointment. But Ethan only reached out, taking her hand in his. There was no anger in his eyes, only understanding. "You mean because I'm in a wheelchair?" he asked softly. She nodded, unable to meet his gaze. What if it's hard? What if I'm not enough?" His grip tightened slightly, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "Olivia, you don't have to love me in spite of this chair. I want you to love me for who I am, with or without it. It's just a part of me. It's not me." His words washed over her, easing the weight pressing down on her chest. And in that moment, she knew. She knew that whatever challenges might come, they would face them together. Because it wasn't about what made him different. It was about everything else. The way he made her laugh, the way he listened, the way he saw her. Their love blossomed even more after that conversation. The doubts faded, replaced by a steady, unwavering certainty. Then, one day, under the same tree where they had shared so many quiet moments, Ethan took out a small velvet box. His hands were steady, his voice unwavering as he asked her to spend forever with him. Tears blurred her vision as she nodded, a smile breaking across her face. "Yes," she whispered, voice choked with emotion. 1,000 times, yes. Preparations for their wedding began soon after. Olivia was caught up in a whirlwind of excitement, picking out dresses, choosing flowers, and dreaming of their future together. But she couldn't ignore the whispers, the sideways glances from people who didn't understand. They looked at Ethan's chair and then at her, and she could almost hear their unspoken questions. But none of it mattered, because every time she looked at him, she saw more than just the chair. She saw the man she loved, the man who had changed her life forever. Olivia sat at the kitchen table, her fingers lightly tracing the rim of her coffee cup, but her eyes were elsewhere. Her mother, across from her, sipped her tea slowly, eyes narrowed, the unspoken words hovering in the air between them. The soft clink of the spoon against the cup broke the silence, but Olivia could feel the weight of what was coming. Her mom's voice was gentle but firm. "Sweetheart, are you sure about this?" Olivia's hand stilled, the cup feeling heavier in her grasp. Her brows furrowed, and she met her mother's gaze with confusion laced in her eyes. "What do you mean, Mom? I love Ethan. Of course, I'm sure." The older woman sighed, setting her cup down with a quiet thud. Her hands rested softly on the table, but her expression remained tense. "It's not that you don't love him, Olivia, but marriage, especially to someone in Ethan's situation, it's a lot to think about. His condition. Are you ready for what that means long-term?" Olivia's chest tightened. She had heard this from others before, but hearing it from her mother cut deeper. "Mom," her voice trembled, "Ethan being in a wheelchair doesn't change who he is. He's still the man I fell in love with." Her mother's face softened, but the concern in her eyes remained. "I know, Olivia, but what if things get harder? What if you have to care for him in ways you never thought about? I just want to make sure you're not walking into something unprepared." Olivia's eyes fell to the table, her fingers now fiddling with the napkin in front of her. The knot in her stomach twisted tighter. She had always been aware of Ethan's situation, but hearing it laid out like this made the future feel more uncertain. Later that night, she lay in her darkened bedroom, the ceiling above her offering no answers. Her mother's words echoed in the quiet, louder now that there was no one to distract her. What if she's right? The question slipped from her lips into the empty room, hanging there with no reply. As the days passed, the whispers around her didn't fade. Instead, they grew louder, more insistent. Her friends had been supportive at first, but now there were sideways glances, concerned looks exchanged behind her back. Even when she met them for lunch, she could sense it, something unsaid lingering in the air. Emily leaned in across the table, her voice low but serious. "Olivia, we love you. We love Ethan too. But are you really happy? Like, deep down?" Olivia's fork froze midair, her heart thudding louder in her chest. She forced a small smile, but her hands felt unsteady. "Of course I am. What makes you think otherwise?" Emily exchanged a glance with the others, a silent conversation happening without Olivia's participation. "We just worry about you. You've always been the one to take care of others, to give everything. We want to make sure this is what you really want, not something you feel you have to do." Olivia set her fork down gently, her appetite completely gone now. She could feel their eyes on her, waiting for an answer she wasn't sure how to give. "Ethan makes me happy," she said softly, though the certainty in her voice wavered. That night, the wedding invitations sat on the coffee table, untouched. Olivia sat beside them, her arms wrapped around herself, the warmth of the room doing little to chase away the cold doubt that had settled in her chest. Her friends, her family, they all seemed to think she was making some grand sacrifice, like marrying Ethan was a burden she was willing to bear, not a choice she was excited to make. She squeezed her eyes shut, memories of Ethan flooding her mind. The way he laughed, the way he held her hand when she was nervous, the quiet moments they shared that made everything feel right. He wasn't just a man in a wheelchair. He was her partner, her love. Why couldn't anyone else see that? On the morning of her wedding, Olivia stood before the mirror, her breath catching in her throat as she gazed at her reflection. Her dress, elegant and white, fit perfectly, the lace delicate and soft against her skin. But it wasn't the dress that filled her thoughts. Her fingers brushed lightly over the veil, her heart racing as the reality of the day sunk in. "Olivia, are you ready?" Emily's voice drifted in from the other room, but Olivia barely heard it. Her mind was miles away, at the church where guests were already gathering, their whispered doubts filling the air like static. Some would smile and support her, but others would still question her decision. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the veil, but then she caught her own reflection again. She saw not just a bride, but a woman who had fought for her love, who had stood against the quiet judgments and doubts that had surrounded her for weeks. Today was about her and Ethan. Today was about love, not fear. Taking a deep breath, she stepped away from the mirror, her heart steady now. This was her moment, their moment. Nothing else mattered. As the guests filled the church, the murmur of soft conversations hung in the air. People shifted in their seats, stealing glances at one another, while some exchanged quiet words. Ethan, sitting near the altar, felt the collective energy around him but didn't react. His hands rested calmly on his lap, his gaze occasionally drifting toward the entrance as he waited. His suit was sharp, fitting him like it had been made just for this moment. The only sign of movement came from his fingers as they gently traced the edge of his wheelchair. Somewhere in the middle of the rows, two women leaned closer to one another. The first, Olivia's cousin, whispered something, a hint of concern in her voice, while her friend nodded thoughtfully. Ethan caught a fragment of their conversation but let it roll off him. He was used to the whispers. Today was about Olivia, and nothing was going to take his focus off her. In the bride's room, Olivia stood before a large mirror, staring at her reflection. Her hands were slightly trembling as she smoothed the fabric of her gown. She exhaled slowly, trying to calm her racing heart. Behind her, her father entered quietly, his footsteps soft against the wooden floor. "You look perfect," he said, his voice thick with emotion as he stood beside her. Olivia glanced at him, her lips twitching into a nervous smile. "Am I doing the right thing?" Her voice was barely a whisper, and she could feel her pulse in her throat. Her father placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. He paused, gathering his thoughts before responding. "Olivia," he said softly, "I've seen the way Ethan looks at you, and I've seen the way you look at him. That's all that matters." Olivia's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she nodded, her heart lifting slightly at her father's words. The music began to play softly in the distance, signaling that it was time. She took a deep breath and straightened her gown once more, her hands finally steady. As Olivia stepped out into the church, her father at her side, the room hushed. All eyes turned to her, and she could feel the weight of their gazes, but her own eyes were fixed on Ethan. The aisle stretched before her, and with each step, the distance between them seemed to shrink and expand all at once. The nervousness in her chest slowly subsided when she saw him sitting there, waiting for her, as steady as ever. Ethan's eyes locked onto hers, and in that moment, nothing else existed. The world narrowed to just the two of them. The whispers, the stares, none of it mattered. As she reached him and their hands clasped together, a calm washed over her. But as they stood before the altar, something in Ethan's eyes flickered, something she hadn't seen before. He seemed distant, like a shadow of doubt had passed over him. Olivia's brow furrowed in confusion, her heart quickening again, this time not out of excitement, but out of concern. Before the priest could begin, Ethan's hand tightened around hers. She glanced at him, her lips parting to ask if he was all right. But before she could speak, Ethan's voice filled the quiet air. "Olivia, wait," he said softly, his words carrying through the stillness of the room. A ripple of murmurs passed through the crowd as everyone shifted in their seats, eyes wide with curiosity. Olivia's heart thudded painfully in her chest. She turned fully toward him, confusion flooding her features. "What's wrong?" she whispered, her voice barely audible, but the tension in the room had thickened. Ethan took a breath, his fingers trembling in hers. "There's something I need to tell you," he began, his eyes pleading with her. "Something I should have told you a long time ago." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. Her mind raced as she tried to understand what was happening. "What is it, Ethan?" she asked, her voice shaky. He hesitated, glancing out at the crowd before focusing entirely on her. "I'm not who you think I am," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "I'm not really disabled." The word struck Olivia like a physical blow. She blinked, her brain struggling to comprehend. "What?" she whispered, her voice barely there. "What do you mean?" "I've been pretending," Ethan said, his voice firmer now, as if speaking the truth had given him strength. "I'm not disabled. I can walk." The gasps from the crowd were like waves crashing against the walls of the church. Olivia stood frozen, her fingers loosening from Ethan's. The weight of the revelation crushed down on her, making her legs feel weak. "Why?" she asked, her voice breaking as tears welled in her eyes. "Why would you lie about that?" Ethan's face crumpled, his guilt written in every line. "I needed to know if you could love me for who I am," he explained, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not for what I could give you, not for my looks, not for my wealth. I've seen too many people use me, and I wanted something real. When I met you, I saw how genuine you were. I thought if I hid that part of myself, I could find out if your love was real." Olivia stared at him, her heart breaking with each word. The betrayal stung deeper than she ever imagined. "You lied to me," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You didn't trust me. I didn't mean to hurt you," Ethan said, his voice desperate. "I didn't know how else to protect myself." Olivia's mind was spinning, her world shattering around her. She pulled her hand from his, stepping back. The church was silent now, all eyes on her, waiting. But all she could see was Ethan, the man she thought she knew, and the lie that had unraveled everything. The church was heavy with silence, every eye locked on Ethan as he spoke. His voice was low, but it carried through the room, each word deepening the tension. Olivia stood a few steps away, her expression unreadable as she looked at the man she had thought she knew. Her heart raced, emotions swirling in her chest. This was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, yet here she was, reeling from the revelation that Ethan, the man she loved, had lied to her from the very beginning. "You should have trusted me," Olivia whispered, her voice thick with pain. Tears brimmed in her eyes, and she shook her head slightly, trying to hold them back. "You should have told me the truth from the start. I loved you, Ethan. I loved you for who you are, not for your wheelchair. But now, I don't even know what's real anymore." She looked away, blinking furiously as tears began to spill down her cheeks. Ethan took a hesitant step forward, his hand outstretched as if he could reach across the space between them, erase all the hurt with a touch. "Olivia, please," he murmured, his eyes pleading. "I know I hurt you, and I will never forgive myself for that. But the man you fell in love with, that's me. The wheelchair didn't change who I am inside. I needed to know if your love was real." Olivia took a step back, as though his words stung. She wrapped her arms around herself, as if trying to keep the pieces of her shattered heart together. The guests watched, some whispering among themselves, their confusion and shock palpable. "Everything else was a lie, but my love for you, that was real," Ethan insisted, his voice breaking with desperation. Olivia looked at him, searching his face for some trace of the man she thought she knew. But every memory felt tainted now. The laughter they had shared, the quiet moments, the promises, they all seemed to crumble under the weight of his deception. Her gaze dropped to the floor as she struggled to breathe through the pain. "Ethan, I just need time," she said softly. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it echoed through the silent church. She turned on her heel and walked swiftly down the aisle, her shoulders trembling as she tried to hold herself together. The door to the small room at the back of the church swung shut behind her. Olivia leaned against it, gasping for air. Her chest felt like it was being crushed. Her fingers pressed to her lips as she tried to silence the sobs that threatened to spill out. She slid down to the floor, her dress pooling around her, and buried her face in her hands. What was she supposed to do now? How could she marry a man who had built their relationship on a lie? She thought of all the times she had bared her soul to him, shared her dreams, her fears. Had he been lying to her all along? Olivia wiped her eyes roughly. She had loved Ethan, truly loved him, and despite everything, she knew that hadn't changed. Her heart still yearned for him, still clung to the moments they'd shared. But trust was fragile. How could she give him her heart again without fearing it would be shattered once more? Back in the church, Ethan stood alone at the altar, his shoulders slumped. He could feel the weight of 100 stares pressing down on him. His chest tightened as he glanced at the door Olivia had disappeared through. He longed to follow her, to hold her and tell her he was sorry, that everything would be okay. But he knew better. Olivia needed time. He had hurt her deeply, and he couldn't undo that with just words. So he stood there, staring at the closed door, praying she would come back, praying she would still want him. Minutes passed, or maybe it was hours. It was hard to tell. Ethan's eyes never left that door. The whispers of the guests seemed to fade into the background. All that mattered was Olivia. He had been so afraid of losing her that he had ended up pushing her away. Now, all he could do was hope that she would understand, that she would forgive him. And then, the door opened. The room went still as Olivia stepped back into the church. Her face was pale, but her eyes were clear. She looked at Ethan, and he felt his heart thud painfully in his chest. She began to walk down the aisle slowly, her gaze never wavering. Each step seemed to echo, the sound of her heels hitting the floor like a heartbeat, steady and strong. When she reached him, she stopped, her gaze piercing. Ethan's breath hitched. The air between them seemed to hum with unspoken words. "Why, Ethan?" she asked quietly, her voice trembling. "Why didn't you just tell me the truth?" Ethan swallowed hard. "I was scared, Olivia. I've been hurt so many times by people who wanted something from me. My money, my status. I needed to know if this was real. I never wanted to hurt you. I just didn't know how to trust that us, wasn't another lie." Olivia's heart twisted at his words. She could see the pain in his eyes, the fear that still lingered. And suddenly, she understood. Ethan had been searching for the same thing she had. Something real, something true. In his own way, he had been as vulnerable, as terrified, as she was. Tears welled up in her eyes again. But this time, they weren't just from pain. "I wish you had trusted me," she whispered. "I loved you, Ethan. I always have. But it's hard. It's hard to know what's real now." Ethan stepped closer, his hand trembling as he reached for hers. "What's real is my love for you, Olivia. That has never changed. I promise you, no more lies. No more secrets. I'll spend the rest of my life proving that to you, if you'll let me." Olivia looked at his outstretched hand, then up into his eyes. She could see the sincerity there, the hope. Her heart ached, torn between the love she still felt and the hurt of his betrayal. But real love wasn't perfect. It was messy and complicated, and sometimes it meant choosing to forgive, choosing to trust again. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. A murmur went through the crowd, but Olivia didn't hear it. All she could see was Ethan, the man she had fallen in love with despite everything. The priest cleared his throat softly, stepping forward to continue the ceremony. Olivia and Ethan stood before him, their hands clasped together. "I love you, Ethan," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "And I forgive you. But we have to rebuild the trust. We have to be honest from now on." Ethan nodded, his eyes shining with tears. "I promise, Olivia. No more secrets. I love you more than anything." As they exchanged their vows, their voices trembled with the weight of everything they had been through. It wasn't just a wedding anymore. It was a promise, a commitment to love each other, flaws and all, to face whatever came their way together. As Olivia stepped forward, her hand trembling slightly, Ethan reached out, his fingers brushing gently against hers. Their eyes met, soft, searching. The church fell silent, the air thick with anticipation. Each word of their vows came slowly, spoken in hushed voices that held a lifetime's worth of pain, hope, and promise. Olivia's voice wavered, but she continued, her gaze never leaving Ethan's. It was as if the world had narrowed down to just the two of them. She didn't need to say everything out loud. The tears pooling in her eyes, the way her breath caught at the end of each sentence, it said it all. Ethan listened intently, his own eyes glistening. There were no grand proclamations, no dramatic confessions, just raw, honest emotion. When the priest's voice rang out, declaring them husband and wife, a collective sigh of relief swept through the congregation. There was applause, soft at first, then louder, more enthusiastic. It wasn't just for the ceremony, but for the journey that had led them here. Ethan squeezed Olivia's hand, and she squeezed back, a smile breaking across her face. They turned to walk down the aisle together, their pace slow, deliberate, savoring each step. The doors swung open, and the evening light bathed them in a soft, golden glow. The sky, tinged with shades of pink and orange, seemed to mirror the emotions swirling around them, beautiful, serene, yet charged with the energy of a new beginning. Ethan glanced at Olivia, his smile gentle, his expression unguarded. She felt a rush of warmth and leaned closer, their shoulders brushing as they moved forward. At the reception, the room buzzed with laughter and conversation. But there was a sense of quiet reflection as well, a shared understanding of what this day represented. Olivia and Ethan moved among the guests, exchanging hugs and handshakes. Each smile they received, each embrace, felt like a piece of the puzzle falling into place, affirming the strength of what they had built together. When they finally found a moment alone at their table, surrounded by the soft flicker of candlelight, Olivia let out a long, slow breath. She turned to Ethan, her fingers intertwined with his, and for a moment, neither spoke. There was no need to fill the silence. Everything that mattered was already there, unspoken, understood. "I can't believe we're here," she whispered, the words barely more than a breath. Ethan nodded, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "We made it, Olivia, because we never gave up, even when it seemed impossible." Their gazes locked, a quiet intensity in the way they looked at each other. It was as if the whole room, the whole world, had faded away, leaving just them. The sound of clinking glasses, the soft murmur of voices, it all receded into the background. All that existed was this, two people who had chosen love, even when it hurt, even when it seemed easier to let go. As the night wore on, they drifted away from the noise and the light, stepping outside under the cool, clear sky. Stars shimmered above, and a gentle breeze stirred the leaves around them. Ethan shrugged off his jacket and draped it over Olivia's shoulders. She looked up at him, her eyes wide, vulnerable. "Do you think things will be different now?" she asked, her voice laced with a hint of uncertainty. Ethan's arms encircled her, pulling her close. "Yes," he murmured, his lips brushing against her hair. "But in the best way possible. We'll be honest, open. No more walls, no more holding back." Olivia nodded slowly, feeling the truth of his words settle within her. She closed her eyes, resting her head against his chest. The steady thump of his heartbeat beneath her ear was a comfort, a promise. They stayed like that for a while, wrapped up in each other, the world outside a distant echo. Then, without a word, Ethan pulled back, his hand extending toward her. Olivia looked at him, puzzled. "Dance with me?" he asked softly. She laughed, shaking her head. "There's no music." Ethan's smile widened, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "We don't need music, Olivia. Just you and me." He guided her into a gentle sway, their movements slow, unhurried. There was no rhythm but their own, no melody but the sound of their breaths mingling in the cool night air. Olivia felt herself relax, a sense of peace washing over her. This was it, she realized. Not the grand moments or the perfect days, but these small, quiet ones. The times when all that mattered was being with each other. They moved together, lost in their own world, the stars above a silent witness to their love. Olivia's heart swelled as she looked up at Ethan, the words forming on her lips before she could stop them. "I love you." Ethan's smile softened, his eyes shining with something deep, something unbreakable. I love you too, Olivia.
Forever.
And in that moment, under the vast, endless sky, they sealed their love, not with words, but with the quiet promise of a lifetime spent together. Through the good and the bad, the laughter and the tears, they would be there, side by side, strong, unwavering. Their love had been tested, but it had emerged, not perfect, but real. And that, Olivia knew, was all they would ever need. If this story resonated with you, and you're looking for more uplifting and inspiring tales, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Together, let's explore stories that highlight the incredible strength of the human spirit and the blessings life brings. Thank you for joining me on this journey. I'm excited to share more stories with you in the next video. Remember, embrace the positivity around you and believe in the incredible beauty of life. Let's keep inspiring one another.